There is a silent cruelty in the word potential. It sounds like hope, but it hides despair. It whispers to you, you could be more. And in that whisper lies the beginning of your torment. For potential is not a gift. It is a wound that never closes. It measures the infinite distance between what you are and what the will demands that you become. The greater your sense of potential, the more you suffer from its absence, because you can feel the vastness of what will never be realized. Society calls this motivation. I call it the slow bleeding of the soul. We are told from birth that we can be anything, but this is the first illusion for you. Cannot be anything. You can only be what your will allows you to be. And the will, that blind, insatiable force that moves all creatures, does not ask for your opinion. It drives you like a storm drives a ship. You think you steer, but you are only reacting to winds older than thought itself. Every dream you chase is merely a translation of the will's hunger. Every achievement, a temporary silence in the noise of desire. You do not pursue success. You flee from the horror of emptiness. The tragedy is not that you fail to reach your potential. The tragedy is that potential exists at all. It keeps you restless, suspended between what is and what might be, trapped in an eternal rehearsal for a life that never arrives. You wake each morning with the quiet nausea of becoming. You chase improvement, thinking that somewhere, beyond one more effort, peace will meet you. But peace never comes. Because the will does not seek peace, it only seeks continuation. It demands new hungers to justify its existence. And you obey. You go to work, you study, you plan, you hope. You make lists of goals and rituals of productivity. You whisper to yourself that someday it will make sense. But life does not make sense. It makes motion, and motion is not progress. It is the will's favorite disguise. It keeps you busy so you do not notice the futility of your own struggle. The modern world calls this ambition. I call it the hypnosis of the herd. For everywhere you look, the same sickness wears different masks. The artist paints not for beauty, but for recognition. The scholar studies not for truth, but for status. The lover loves not for union, but for reassurance. And all call their sickness by noble names. The world admires those who chase endlessly, and pities those who rest. Yet the one who rests may have seen what the others refuse to, that chasing is merely suffering in motion. We speak of self-improvement, as if life were a project to complete. But what are you improving? A vessel condemned to sink from the moment of birth. You polish the wood, you repaint the deck, you rearrange the furniture, yet the sea waits. Always the sea waits. The truth is too simple for our vanity. You are not meant to become perfect. You are meant to see clearly. The will does not care about your happiness. It only hungers for repetition, for the cycle to continue. It creates in you the illusion of purpose, so that you may endure your servitude willingly. Like a beast dreaming of freedom while walking in circles, you confuse motion for escape. Thus, potential becomes the cruelest illusion of all. It tempts you with the fantasy of fulfillment, while ensuring you never reach it. You believe you are climbing a mountain, but you are merely walking in a spiral. And yet, this is not cause for despair, but for awakening. For once you see the game, the chains loosen. Once you understand that the will is blind, you stop expecting it to see you. Once you grasp that fulfillment is impossible, you stop confusing delay for meaning. Then something shifts. A strange silence emerges. The noise of ambition fades, and you glimpse what few ever see. That peace lies not in achievement, but in the absence of demand. You cannot escape suffering, but you can strip it of its disguise. You can refuse to call it failure. You can meet it as what it has always been, the shadow of existence itself. Most will never understand this. They will keep running, keep inventing new illusions, because they fear that seeing clearly means losing all reason to live. But it is the opposite. Seeing clearly is the only reason worth living. You will still work, still create, still strive, but your striving will no longer be worship, it will be play. You will no longer mistake the will's noise for your identity. And in that quiet rebellion, you will taste something deeper than happiness. You will taste freedom, not the freedom to do, but the freedom to stop pretending, to stand still within the storm and say, I see you. That is the beginning of wisdom. That is the first cut into illusion. Human beings spend their entire lives chasing a phantom they call happiness. They call it freedom, success, love, enlightenment, but it is always the same ghost, dressed in new language. It begins in childhood, when the first promise is made. If you do this, you will be happy. And so the child learns the rhythm of pursuit. Study to be praised. Work to be secure. Love to be fulfilled. And yet, the promise is never delivered, only deferred. Happiness is the bait that keeps the will moving. The will has no purpose but to perpetuate itself, so it invents goals that can never be reached. It teaches you to run toward light that always retreats as you approach. You believe your suffering is the sign of distance, that happiness waits just ahead. But suffering is not the distance, it is the road itself. Everything living suffers because everything living wills. To will is to want, and to want is to feel the absence of what is wanted. Existence, therefore, is a permanent condition of lack. The more vivid the consciousness, the sharper the awareness of that lack, and the deeper the pain. And yet, we keep believing. We keep imagining that if only we rearranged the furniture of life, more money, better partner, higher status, improved body, spiritual awakening, then finally, peace would arrive. But peace does not arrive. It is not part of the design. Nature does not build creatures for contentment. It builds them for continuation. The tiger is not happy when it kills. The bird is not happy when it flies. They act, and then they act again, driven by the pulse that knows no rest. The same law moves through you. When you reach one goal, another appears. When you quench one thirst, another dries your throat. And in those rare moments when all desires are briefly silent, when you sit in satisfaction, boredom rises like a fog, reminding you that without wanting, you feel nothing at all. The modern world has turned this ancient torment into an industry. Billions are spent convincing you that happiness is a product, a course, a lifestyle, a reward. It tells you to choose joy as if suffering were an error in decision-making. It tells you to manifest abundance, as if the universe were a polite merchant waiting for your order. And so, you remain the same dissatisfied, but now guilty for being dissatisfied. You call your misery a mindset problem and pay others to fix it. Happiness, in truth, is not a condition, but a coincidence, a fleeting alignment of nerves and circumstance. It appears only when the will is briefly silent. A hunger satisfied, a pain momentarily soothed, a desire forgotten for one short breath. That is all. To make happiness your goal is to make restlessness your companion. You become like a man chasing his own reflection, furious that the image moves when he does. But here lies the hidden mercy of despair. When you finally exhaust the pursuit, when the will has whipped you into numbness, you glimpse a clarity beyond both joy and sorrow. You begin to see that happiness is not the summit of life. It is a mirage on the way down. You stop asking, "How can I be happy?" and start asking, "What is this thing that suffers?" That question is the beginning of awakening. To live wisely is not to eliminate suffering, but to understand its necessity. The wise man does not seek happiness. He seeks lucidity. He accepts that pain is the constant, and peace is the interval. He takes neither personally. In this understanding, a strange calm begins to bloom. Not the intoxication of bliss, but the sobriety of acceptance. You will still feel pain. You will still desire. But you will stop believing that this pain is a malfunction of existence. You will stop making bargains with the universe. You will simply see that to be alive is to ache, and to see this clearly is to be free of complaint. And that freedom, though it looks nothing like happiness, is far closer to truth. It is the quiet joy of no longer demanding that life feel good. Happiness was never attainable, because it was never real. It was only a trick of the will, the scent of fruit in a dream. You wake and realize the fruit is gone. But in that waking, you are finally alive. Desire is not direction. It is hunger blind, repetitive, indifferent to where it leads you. Yet most people call their desires purpose, as if craving itself contained meaning. The will deceives you this way. It whispers that what you want is what you are meant for. But the will wants only one thing to continue. It does not care how. You may build empires, chase lovers, or seek enlightenment. It is all the same motion. The organism escaping stillness. Desire burns bright, but it sees nothing. It promises peace, but delivers only the next desire. You mistake movement for meaning, compulsion for calling. Purpose is not found in what you crave, but in what remains when craving ends. When the noise subsides and only silence stays, that is closer to truth. To follow desire is to obey the will. To see desire clearly is to begin disobedience. You envy what others possess because you believe their fulfillment must reveal a secret path. But envy you. Live as if salvation waits ahead in the next job, the next lover, the next version of yourself. This illusion keeps you moving, but never arriving. The future is the opium of the dissatisfied. It promises redemption while quietly erasing the present. You suffer not from the weight of today, but from the fantasy of tomorrow. The will paints hope to make endurance bearable. It keeps you alive by lying. But every someday is a mirage. When you reach it, it dissolves. There is no future, only the endless present, disguised as waiting. To see this is not despair. It is liberation from the calendar of delusion. Live without leaning forward. Let the next moment come uninvited. Only then do you finally stand still enough to exist. You suffer and immediately ask, why me? As if existence were a contract, and pain a breach of terms. But life owes you nothing. Pain is not punishment. It is participation. To live is to press against the edges of reality, and those edges cut. You call it unfair. Yet fairness is a human dream. Nature has never signed it. The rain falls on both the innocent and the cruel. The fire burns whoever stands too close. Justice belongs to the mind, not the world. The wise do not seek fairness. They seek understanding. They do not curse the flame, they learn its nature. And step carefully. Pain is not an error. It is the cost of being. Accept this, and half your suffering disappears. You want to be seen, but the moment you live for the gaze of others, you vanish from your own. Fame, status, approval, they are mirrors that distort. They reflect not who you are, but what others need you to be. The crowd's applause is the loudest form of emptiness. It fills your ears while hollowing your soul. The more you perform, the less you exist. Recognition feeds the ego, but starves the being. Walk away from the stage. Let silence forget your name. In obscurity, you will find a strange truth. To be unseen is to be real. You collect facts as if truth were made of fragments. You read, quote, analyze, but your mind grows louder, not clearer. Knowledge fills space. Wisdom empties it. The first multiplies noise. The second silences it. You mistake accumulation for understanding, forgetting that to grasp something deeply is to hold it lightly. The learned man often drowns in what he knows. The wise man breathes beneath it. Wisdom begins where the desire to prove ends. When you no longer need to be right only to see, only the confession that you have lost sight of your own will. The herd persuades you that success, wealth, fame, these are proofs of worth. You kneel before borrowed values, mistaking imitation for identity. And so, you live not to see, but to be seen. Every comparison deepens your servitude. You build a self from reflections, not from reality. You become a puppet dancing to invisible applause. Freedom begins when you stop measuring yourself by the noise around you. The will of others cannot complete you. It can only consume you. To withdraw from comparison is not defeat, it is deliverance. The silence that follows is the sound of returning to yourself. You move constantly, always busy, always chasing. But motion is not meaning, it is distraction with good posture. The will fears stillness, for in stillness it must face itself. So it keeps you running through work, screens, ambition, noise. You call it productivity. It is only panic disguised as purpose. To stand still feels like death, because the self is built on movement. But only in stillness do you see what truly moves you, and how little it matters. Stop running. The finish line does not exist. Progress is not ahead. It is the quiet clarity of no longer needing to flee. You long for love, as if it were a cure, a final rescue from your own solitude. But love too serves the will. It lures two sufferers into the same illusion. You believe love will complete you, yet every union conceals the same hunger. To be seen, to be wanted, to be less alone. Desire disguises itself as devotion. Possession masquerades as care. And when the illusion fades, you call it heartbreak, though it was only awakening. Love cannot save you because it was never meant to. It is not salvation, but recognition two beings briefly admitting their shared despair. When you stop demanding that love heal you, it finally becomes beautiful. Not a cure, but a quiet companionship in the tragedy of being. You run from silence as if it were death itself. Yet what you truly fear is meeting the self that hides beneath noise. The crowd numbs you with its chatter, its movements, its borrowed meanings. It keeps you safe from reflection and therefore from truth. But solitude is not emptiness. It is exposure. It strips you of identity, leaving only what cannot be faked. Most call this loneliness. The wise call it clarity. To sit alone without distraction is to stand before the mirror of existence where you see not who you should be, but who you are. And though that sight burns, it also frees. For nothing weighs heavier than the self you never face. You cling to goodness as if it were armor against despair. You believe that virtue will grant purpose, that being right will make life right. But morality is often pride in disguise. You perform decency to prove you deserve existence. The universe, however, is indifferent to your virtue. Stars burn, wars erupt, children die, and no moral equation balances the pain. Goodness does not guarantee meaning, it only softens cruelty. Compassion, not righteousness, is the only honest morality, for it admits the shared helplessness of all who live. Do good, but without illusion. The kindest act is the one done without expecting the world to notice or reward. You treat existence like a problem to solve, as if suffering were a glitch to repair. But life is not broken. It is tragic by design. Every system you build, every philosophy, every therapy, all are attempts to make peace with the incurable. You cannot fix pain without fixing the will itself, and that would mean ending life. So you patch, adjust, optimize, and still you bleed. Wisdom is not control, but concession. The world will not bend. Only you can soften. Do not seek to perfect life. Seek only to see it as it is. That sight will not heal you, but it will make you honest. You live as if death were the enemy, the great interruption. Yet, death is not interruption, it is conclusion. The will fears its own silence, so it invents eternity, heaven, legacy, memory, all clever disguises for denial. You cling to youth, to progress, to continuity. But every heartbeat is already a small surrender to death, a rhythm counting down, not up. To resist death is to resist rest. The tragedy is not that life ends, but that we refuse to let it. Peace comes not from conquering death, but from consenting to it. When you cease to fight the inevitable, you touch the only freedom left, the freedom of release. To die before dying, to stop clinging, is to live without fear. The modern world has perfected distraction. It no longer needs violence to enslave the mind-only stimulation. Silence has become unbearable. People fill every pause with sound, every thought with opinion, every space with light. Noise is the new air. They breathe it to avoid suffocating on their own awareness. The ancient man feared the wilderness. The modern man fears the quiet room. Algorithms have replaced philosophy. The crowd does not think it reacts. It does not seek truth, it seeks agreement. And what cannot be shared cannot be believed. The will has found its greatest invention, the infinite scroll. A machine that feeds hunger while keeping it unsatisfied. Desire renewed, endlessly refreshed. A loop without exit, perfectly adapted to the restless soul. Modernity promises liberation, but delivers compulsion. The worker believes he is free because he can choose his distractions. The thinker believes he is wise because he can quote his captors. And the child grows into an adult who has never been alone with his own mind. We have mistaken speed for intelligence, connection for intimacy, abundance for meaning. The body is overfed, the spirit is starved. The more we accumulate, the less we possess ourselves. The machines reflect the will perfectly tireless, thoughtless, insatiable. They never rest, and neither do we. We have built a civilization that mirrors our own torment. And in this constant motion, we lose the art of contemplation. No one lingers, no one listens. Even art must shout to be noticed. The quiet soul is now considered defective, too slow, too deep, too withdrawn for the marketplace of noise. But perhaps the quiet soul is the last remnant of sanity, for in silence the illusions fall apart. Without noise, the mind begins to see, and seeing is dangerous. It dismantles the lies that keep the machinery turning. That is why silence is outlawed. That is why stillness is feared. Because a quiet human is an unprofitable one. And yet, in the cracks of this mechanical age, a few still sit alone in rooms without sound and remember what it means to be conscious. There are rare moments when the noise collapses, when the will pauses, and you glimpse the still core beneath the storm. These moments do not feel triumphant. They feel empty, frighteningly so. Yet, in that emptiness lies a purity that no pleasure can imitate. You see life's cruelty not as personal, but as universal. Suffering stops being yours, it becomes ours. And from that recognition, compassion is born. Not the sentimental compassion of speeches and charities, but the quiet kind, the knowing look between two beings who understand the futility of their struggle. It is not love that redeems, but empathy stripped of illusion. In lucid stillness, you stop demanding that life entertain you. You stop needing every moment to justify itself. You simply let the world be tragic, indifferent, magnificent in its indifference. This is not happiness. It is peace's shadow, a fragile calm born of surrender, not conquest. You begin to notice the small things again. The rhythm of rain on glass, the patient decay of an old wall, the brief glow of evening light. Nothing has improved, but you have ceased to demand improvement. That is why the world suddenly seems beautiful. You start to see that beauty was never absent, only buried under your insistence that life must be more than it is. In that stillness, time loosens. You realize that nothing needs saving, not the world, not you. Everything is already fulfilling its own necessity. And for a fleeting instant, you forgive existence for being what it is. You even forgive yourself for being part of it. The long journey through mistakes, illusions, and relentless desire brings you here, not to triumph, but to surrender. You have seen that the world owes you nothing. You have understood that happiness is a phantom, that desire is endless, that others' will is blind to your needs. You have confronted the machinery of modernity, the noise of the crowd, the hunger of the will itself. And now you stop, not with celebration, not with hope, not with plans for a brighter tomorrow. You stop because you finally see. The struggle is not an error, nor are you a failure. It is existence, and it is enough to witness it clearly. Death approaches, as it always does, like a patient teacher. Resisting it is futile. Fearing it is natural. Accepting it is liberation. You realize that letting go of ambitions, illusions, and even of life itself is the final act of freedom. You need not conquer the world, the will, or even yourself. You need only consent to what is. And in that consent, a strange peace arises. Not the peace of happiness, but the peace of seeing unmasked reality and standing before it without flinching. The candle burns low, shadows lengthen, nothing remains to chase, nothing to avoid. The will has quieted, the illusions have fallen. Only you, raw, awake, finite, and the world as it is. This is the final clarity. To cease pretending, to stop demanding, to allow being to flow through you unresisted. It is not joy, it is not triumph, it is the sober, bittersweet stillness of acceptance. And in that stillness, you are whole, not victorious, not enlightened, not saved, simply fully aware. The candle flickers once more, and then it goes out. Silence.